Did you hear that? Right when I'm coming off idle, like if I just kind of tap the throttle, it'll make kind of a shaking sound that sounds a lot to me like tensioners. It looks like Dory had her belts replaced at some point in her life, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just replaced the belts and didn't touch any of the other serpentine belt system, so I think it's time to replace it. Also, you probably could hear when I turned on the AC. The AC belt is making the worst noise ever.
Here's your coffee.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Exactly. You scared the shit out of me. How long were you there? Am I gonna see it in the clip?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good coffee. Anyway, you can probably hear in that clip just how noisy the AC belt is. I believe it has a tensioner of its own and it's making that kind of high-pitched squeaking sound. So I'm thinking that might be the issue. I'm hoping that might be the issue because the noise is kind of annoying and it kind of worries me, honestly. Okay, all the other stuff we're gonna be doing today is kind of like an extreme version of while you're in there. You can see here in my parts bin that we have everything we need to do a basic cooling system rebuild. We got BMW blue coolant. We have a brand new water pump. Fun fact, if you're not into E36's, the water pump goes in the block like down there, basically facing forward. And if I take off this cover, you can see the impeller itself. Man, get out of there. Okay, so this impeller, which as you can see is made out of beautiful metal, BMW decided to make the stock one out of plastic. That literally makes 0 sense to me. The actual thing that is pumping water through the engine, that's getting heat cycled like 1.5 million times, why would you make that out of plastic? Because inevitably, when that fails, it's gonna send shards of plastic through your cooling system. Super stupid. Glad we have a metal part to replace it with. Okay, in addition to the water pump, we also have a metal thermostat housing. This, surprise, surprise, is also plastic. You can see it right there. That is prone to cracking, and then it leaks coolant everywhere, and then your engine overheats, and it's a bad time. This metal one was actually really inexpensive. It was like $25 or something like that. So I'm hoping we can get this to seal correctly, and it's gonna be a lifetime replacement part. And then, while we're in there, we might as well do the actual thermostat itself. As you can see, pretty basic little piece here. Again, not that expensive, but while I have everything taken apart, might as well replace this as well. And then we have all of the belt stuff, all new pulleys, all new tensioners. I have some Durco HT gray. Anytime I'm messing with like coolant or oil or anything like that, it's good to have this on hand just to seal up those places where it's likely to leak. And then just yesterday, I got this neat little coolant funnel. See, it's got this cute little notch in it where you can put the coolant bottle. Kind of cool. Hopefully this will help because I am most terrified of not bleeding the system correctly and then overheating the engine. So first order of business, once the car is up on jack stands, is to drain all of the coolant out of the engine. Dory, for whatever reason, has green coolant. Technically, I think she should have blue coolant. So I'm gonna have to drain the radiator, drain the block, get as much of that green coolant out as I possibly can, and then go back in with the new coolant and the distilled water, fill it back up once everything's buttoned up. But that's not for a while. I'm gonna take my time, try to be methodical. Let's get into it. I gotta flush my eyes. Oh my god, I'm so stupid. Whoops. Okay, we're back. That was really stupid. I knew in theory that taking the drain plug out of the block was gonna put coolant like everywhere, but I didn't quite think ahead on that one. And so I got a lot in my mouth and a lot in my eyes. We're good now. We flushed it out. We got a new t-shirt. I also reinstalled the drain plugs, both on the radiator and on the block. So luckily now we get to work on the top of the car. I don't have to lie on my back anymore. I'm just gonna get everything out of the way and then we'll get into rebuilding the serpentine belt. Alright fellas, we're basically all torn down. As you can see, we have all of the coolant channels blocked off with some paper towels. Paper towels maybe aren't the best because you could hypothetically get some paper residue in there, but they're only in there temporarily and I did it pretty carefully, so hopefully we're not going to lose any paper into the cooling system. We also got all of the belts off and all of the tensioners off except for the AC one. And you remember that sound we heard when we started up the AC for the first time? That was definitely the tensioner, because when I went to release this belt, it barely gave me any tension, and it was pretty easy to crank back and take the belt off. But the main tensioner, I want to show you something kind of weird. So here is a side-by-side of the old tensioner and the new tensioner. Now, if you're particularly eagle-eyed, you might notice they're different. This one is a completely different design. It's like a rotational spring design, whereas this one, which is the one I commonly see on E36's, that has the linear damper, much like the linear damper that you use for the AC belt. So when I first saw this, I kind of freaked out because I was like, oh my god, did I get the wrong parts? But I don't think I did, and here's my theory. At some point in the car's life, the main tensioner was obviously replaced because 1, it felt really strong, and 2, it's a completely different design than OEM. And for what it's worth, I did find these online as a replacement part. They fit, it works. I could totally imagine some mechanic just ordering the part that fits and throwing it on there even though it's a different design. This one only uses 1 idler pulley, whereas this one uses 2. You can see this top one is the actual idler pulley, whereas this one is the actual tensioner pulley. I did consider just leaving it as it was so I wouldn't mess with anything, but then I realized might as well have new parts in there. Thank God this comes with new hardware because it requires this really long bolt to travel all the way through this thing. And you can see on this old design, the top bolt is tiny. And it comes with all of the awesome replacement hardware, including that T50 Torx bolt, all the washers you need, and everything else. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. If you're doing this at home and you run into something weird like that, chances are you can just use the new parts. It'll be okay. I mean, I haven't put them in there, so, hopefully it's okay. All right, fellas, it's been a couple hours. New outfit, we're getting back to it. Everything down here, I think, is taken off. I got that tensioner off pretty easy. And then I gotta do some kind of tedious stuff like cleaning up all this gunk around the thermostat housing because that aluminum one needs a perfectly flat surface in order to seal correctly. The big scary part is gonna be bleeding the system, but I'm not gonna worry about that for now. I'm just gonna bolt some stuff together. Okay, welcome back. It is the next day. It's about, I think like 7 p.m. I've been working on this basically all day. Everything is all back together. We got the new thermostat on, the new water pump. I didn't show any of that just because it was kind of difficult to see down there, and I don't want you to have to just like stare at the top of the engine for like 10 minutes. So I got all of that stuff back on my own. Fan is back in. Now I have flushed the system a few times. Oops, why is that? What are you doing? Stay. So I have flushed the cooling system a few times. You can see these jugs go from very green to much less green. Now I'm doing a full flush because there was green coolant in there and I'm not sure what type of coolant it is. And there's kind of like an old wives' tale on BMW forums that you should never mix green and blue coolant. I think it's rooted in like low quality antifreeze that's usually green. And when you mix that with BMW blue, sometimes it can cause like corrosion and sludge buildup in your transmission cooler if you have an automatic. I tried to do the best I could flushing the system without taking off that stupid drain plug on the block. Getting sprayed in the face with coolant and having it go in your mouth and eyes makes me never want to take out that stupid drain plug ever again. Anyway, just draining from the radiator. This is as clear as I can get it. I know it looks pretty darn green, but compared to where it was before, I'm just gonna have to go with it. Also, relatively soon, I will be doing the overflow tank and a metal radiator, just because both of these are plastic. They were replaced at some point in the car's life, but in the interest of preventative maintenance, I am gonna replace them with all metal units at some point pretty soon anyway. And so when the time comes for that, I will strip everything out, dump all the coolant out again. So the service interval will be soon enough that I'm okay mixing some colors of coolants, just a little bit. Okay, that's enough coolant talk. I know that's really boring. I think we're about ready to start up the car and start bleeding the system. You can see I have it on jack stands up pretty high, and that's just to get the front of the engine and the expansion tank to be basically the highest point in the engine. So the idea is that air bubbles will flow up and out of the expansion tank rather than getting caught somewhere back here in the engine and causing causing overheating. I already put back in some BMW blue. It's filled up pretty high, and once I start it, hopefully it'll drop down a little bit as it circulates through the engine and the thermostat opens up. So I think we're ready to go. I think we're ready to turn on the car, and we will finally find out if we fixed that annoying squeaking issue. This entire project was based around fixing that noise. So has it fixed it? I don't know. Let's find out. Woo! No more squeaking. Okay, so as the car warms up, I'm gonna keep an eye on the level. Come on. Okay, for what it's worth, I am basically carefully reaching in here and burping the tubes. And the idea is to get some of the air bubbles out and up through this funnel, because I want to get as much air out of the system before I go and drive this car so that hopefully Dory doesn't overheat. Okay, so in here we can see that we are smack dab at 12 o'clock. That is great. I have the heat on relatively high and it's blowing somewhat warm, but for what it's worth, it actually didn't ever work particularly well. So that makes this whole process a little more stressful because I can't tell if the heat is working. Overall, it's blowing about as warm as it ever has, and we've stayed at 12 o'clock for a while now. So far we're not seeing any overheating. I think next order of business is to drop the car down, take it out on a test drive, and I'm like almost positive that there are going to be air bubbles that we need to bleed out of the system using that little bleed screw on top of the radiator. But so far, so good. Knock on wood. That's a callback to an older video. You should watch that video. Okay, big news. I think it's all bled. I was absolutely dreading bleeding the system because there are so many horror stories online of people not being able to figure it out and then the car overheating and causing all sorts of issues. And I don't mean to jinx it because, you know, it's quite possible that I'm not at all done and it's gonna randomly overheat and it's gonna be a disaster. But so far, so good. It hasn't budged from the 12 o'clock position where it should be. It hasn't started overheating yet. And just now I stopped and cracked the bleed screw. It let out some air and then a constant stream of coolant. And so there was no more bubbling or weird cooling system stuff going on. Now, just to be safe, I am gonna carry around my little overheating kit. So I'm gonna have my BMW blue coolant. I'm gonna have some rags for when I crack the bleed screw, and I'm also gonna keep this around so I can easily crack that bleed screw and then pop it back in. I'm still kind of petrified of overheating Dory. I think she'll be okay, at least I hope so. But definitely the key that made this easier than it should have been was lifting the front end of the car up. From everything that I've read online, when someone does that, everything goes great. When someone tries to bleed the car flat on the ground, it's a disaster. So if you have an E36, give it a shot. Throw it up on some jack stands, see if that helps. Also, to answer the main question of this video, did it solve our mystery sound? Yeah. Dory's idle sounds like a BMW. And it may not have come across on camera, but before, there was a lot of rattling, a lot of squeaking, a lot of noisiness. Like, did you hear that, Miata? That's the type of squeaking I'm talking about. No shade to you, Miata driver. I love your car. Just, you know, there's some belt squeak and stuff like that. I'm glad we got it sorted out. Dory's running better than ever. Was it worth like 2.5 days of work just to get rid of that little sound? Perhaps not, but now I know the cooling system is good. I know we got the right coolant in there, and because I've done it, I know what was done right and I know what was done wrong. And that just gives me peace of mind. Okay, that's it for today's video. If you like the video, make sure to like the video. If you really like the video, make sure to subscribe. I make a new video every single week. Thank you so much for spending your time watching this video, and I will see you next time. Peace.